Hi everyone, and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host, Yvonne Heath, author of the book Love Your Life to Death, and founder of the I Just Showed Up movement. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have my friend that I love so much, Kelly Duggan, here today. Hello, Kelly.
Hello, Yvonne.
So we have had, it was interesting how we met. It was very, I feel like the universe just connects people because you're in Barrie, I'm in Port Sydney. I was connected through someone, a mutual friend, to be on She Talks Radio in Toronto. And she said, you have to meet Kelly. And I said, okay, I would love to meet Kelly. And I am so grateful that we've met. I wish with all my heart and soul we had met for a different reason. But we don't always get to choose that path, do we?
No, that's right.
We don't, yes. So I wanted to have you on the show today just to talk about your incredible, heartwarming, heart-wrenching journey with you and Carter and Patrick and your journey with your family. Mm-hmm. And that's what brought us together initially.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for opening that way because it was a very sad set of circumstances that brought us together, but you've played such an important part in our lives, and I want you to hear that through my story. About 2 years ago, we were living life. My husband Patrick and I have a teenage son Carter, and everything was going great, and then there was that day when it wasn't going so great, and we found out that we learned very suddenly Patrick had advanced cancer with no warning. And we ended up in a whirlwind situation that we were completely unprepared for. It wasn't on our radar whatsoever. And 4 months later, he passed away. And during that time, that very tumultuous time, one of the things I was looking for was a playbook on how do you do this. And I looked around and there really wasn't one. I couldn't find anybody or any resources that could help me deal with the tremendous anticipatory grief and then grief that we were going to have to move through. And it was a few months later when you and I were connected and you shared your book, and I thought, that's it. That's the playbook. And I can't tell you how I clung. I actually have my copy over there. It is dog-eared, and I highlighted every section and I wrote notes in the margins, and it really felt like you wrote this book for me.
Wow.
It felt like the right tool at the right time. So
yes.
I can't thank you enough.
Wow. We're 2 minutes in and you're already going to make me tear up, Kelly. Like, come on. I usually wait at least 5 minutes. To hear those words, honestly, that I could make a difference in that time of your life is, I mean, that's just priceless to me. And the reason to write from my heart experience, because I suffered as a nurse in my nursing experience, and I've seen time and time again people suffer. It's like grieving is enough, but we have all this other suffering surrounding that, and we don't know what to do with it. But you and Patrick, and I love that you did a JED Talk, which is a Georgian College TED Talk. Yeah. I watched it again yesterday. We're going to share the link. Everybody needs to watch this, just so you know. It was extraordinary for so many reasons. First of all, that you were able, I don't know where you found the strength to stand on that stage and share everything that you did. It was so powerful, and what you shared was the three things you heard: advanced cancer, palliative, not curative, months, not years.
Yes.
And you're a young family. You have a young son, and I can't imagine. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah. That was the evening that was so strange because we didn't know what we were dealing with. My husband became very ill very quickly, and we were caught up in this whirlwind of tests and not really understanding. And one evening I popped by the hospital, and I was sitting on the edge of my husband's bed, and the oncologist came in and said those words, advanced cancer, which to me is code. I didn't really understand what that meant. Palliative, not curative. Again, for somebody who's not in the healthcare field,
that would mean nothing to you.
It was still,
most people.
My brain was not catching up to what this meant. And then he said something around we're not really sure what we're dealing with. It could be months, it could be years, but not likely. And so what do you do with that? All of a sudden, within a couple of weeks, and in that moment, our lives changed forever.
On a dime,
go back.
in that very moment, and you're a professor at Georgian College, and Patrick's working, and you have a young son, and life is just moving along, and in that moment, everything changed.
Yeah, we're planners. By nature, we're planners. In fact, my professional background is in planning, and this is just not something we had planned for.
Absolutely not.
And it might be something that you, in very general terms, I mean, I think every couple thinks, I know I can remember having this thought that, one of us is going to go before the other.
Yes.
That was going to be someday in the future.
Way down the road.
And sometimes you might vaguely think, well, what if one of us got into an accident on the way home? And so you might have a vague contingency plan for what that looks like. And so you might have a will, and you might have had some discussions, but boy, when your world changes that quickly, things shift, and they definitely shifted for us, and then they definitely shifted for me and my son, trying to learn how to carry on without our beloved
Patrick, who's just so darn cute, first of all, and you made, in that whirlwind, in that grief, in everything, and you didn't even have any tools to navigate through, but yet you made some incredible choices and decisions to live in gratitude, which most people say, what do you mean? I can't live in gratitude? Look what's happening. Whatever gave you the, fortitude, the heart to choose love and gratitude and make the most of that time?
I took my husband's lead. He was incredibly grateful for all the care he was receiving, for any time that he had to be with family and friends. He was incredibly grateful for the little things, because he had become, he was so sick so fast.
Yes.
The days when he could eat, all of a sudden, was monumental. Oh, he can sip on some chicken noodle soup and it tastes so good, and all of a sudden, these little things that we take for granted each and every day, when your world gets that small, you notice the little things that we fail to take into account each and every day. When we were able to bring him home in a wheelchair, and we were able to wheel him out onto the back deck, and he could sit on his back deck and look at the sunset, and feel some a breeze on his face, and those were truly special moments. Again, things that we had available to us any night of the week.
Sure. Yeah.
But often we get so busy we don't do these things, But when your world becomes really small, and you're on very limited time, you become incredibly grateful for the things that you do have.
Well, you're saying you become incredibly grateful, but I can tell you that in my experience as a chemotherapy nurse for many, many, many years, not everyone takes that road, and that's truly part of my whole teaching and helping to create a culture of change where if we have an acceptance that we're not in each other's lives forever, we do not always die of old age, and we do not always get a warning, and you've lived all of those.
Yes.
And I mean, that those are the hard truths, aren't they?
Yeah.
We wouldn't choose them, but as you also shared in your JED talk, Sheryl Sandberg's book, Option B, is also, most of us are living a version of Option B.
Yeah.
Option A would be your choice. That is no longer on the table. So I can't say what you said in your, I can't say you are going to kick the,
as Sheryl Sandberg says, if Option A is no longer available to you,
kick the bleep
you
out
can choose to kick the stuffing out of Option B.
The stuffing, that's what she's saying. Yeah.
And that became a rallying call. So, and trust me, this was a process, this was a journey, and I made certain choices because Patrick and I would not have wanted this event to completely it's going to impact our son's life. There's no doubt about it. But we didn't want our son's life to be defined only by this event.
Yes.
Horrible, tragic event. And so I knew that my job was for us to keep living. And my job was to make sure that my son could get up in the morning and be hopeful and be excited about kicking the stuffing out of option B. Yes, we want Dad with us, and if we can't have him, we're going to live the best way possible and make him proud as he's watching us from heaven, you know,
Yes.
make him really proud of what we've decided to do with our precious years, and we know there are no guarantees for us either.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the biggest lesson, you know, when you're going along and we get so caught up in things that really don't matter each and every day. And when you have a life and death situation as we did, and you face that, something shifts inside of you. If you allow it to, you start to become very, very mindful of the preciousness of each and every day, and not to waste that time.
Yes, and you honor Patrick and your life together so well. And I know many people think that when you continue to talk about someone who has died, that, oh, they must still be, they're stuck or they're not over their grief. And I try to explain to people, like, you don't get, correct me if you don't get over grief, you build a new life around it. And to carry those memories and share them forever, what a beautiful way to honor someone, because as I always share Matthew Rattan, what he shared with me, be the evidence that someone's life made a difference.
Yes.
And do you know that in your Facebook posts, and it's funny because we haven't had this conversation, but your Facebook posts over the last couple of years, I feel like Patrick's my friend, that I'm like, I really like Patrick. And then I have to stop myself to say, oh yeah, I didn't actually meet him. But I've been getting to know Patrick through your posts, through how much you loved him, through how much he loved you and Carter. And what a beautiful, wonderful way to honor him. And he was that person also, right? He wanted to make people smile. And at his celebration of life, I love what you also did to honor, you asked people, what did you request people in honor of Patrick?
To commit an act of kindness. And so it was very much, so first of all, thank you for sharing that about the Facebook posts. And I've had that feedback as well, that people love to see our pictures and love to hear our comments, because for them it's as though they're getting a chance to get to know Patrick a little bit better.
Yes.
Maybe a different side of him that they never knew. And so we share those. It helps with our grieving, but it also helps just keep their memory alive, which I think is important to us all.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of writing on Facebook, there's this delicate balance, because you don't want to overshare.
Sure.
But I've learned a lot about grief through my process, and so I want to share with people that it's okay to talk about people we've lost.
Yes.
Like,
it's important.
Let's break some of these barriers that seem so taboo. And so we did Patrick's celebration of life completely differently. We wanted the anti-funeral. That was just what was going to work for us.
Yes.
And everybody's different. But
Absolutely.
we were very intentional. We waited a couple of weeks to plan this celebration well, and I had a lot of help from my brother and sister-in-law who really wanted to put on a good show. So it was a beautiful send-off, and it was very much a celebration of life that would include children, because I don't know about you, but my first memory of going to a funeral for a great aunt who had passed was terrifying.
Yes.
It was terrifying.
Yes.
And we have so many little people in our lives who love Patrick,
I'm sure.
we needed for them to be included, but we wanted to normalize death and really make it a celebration. So we did what Patrick would have loved, and that is we rented space at the Tiffin Conservation Center. Patrick was a real outdoorsman, and he always wanted to throw this great big winter party. So that's what we did. And we encouraged people to dress casually. There were nature walks in the snow. We had birdseed to feed the chickadees. We invited all the children to make little bird houses. So there was a little painting corner.
My goodness.
And we just gathered. There was a big fireplace. So there was food, camaraderie, a warm fire, crafts, nature walk. And then we had speeches. And that was it. It was gorgeous. And I'm so proud that we did that. And I think we really honored him in that way.
It sounds like Patrick. It sounds
Totally him.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that you allowed all feelings. If people were having fun and laughter, that's okay. Do a craft. If someone's crying, that's okay too. I'm sure there were tears. And as to say about the grief journey, it's not all grief or joy. Laughter, tears, it's okay for all of it, isn't it?
Well, I actually said that in my speech on that day, as I've learned that joy and sorrow can exist simultaneously, and that's okay. We felt joy that Patrick was no longer in pain.
Yes.
That's a legitimate feeling.
Yes.
And please don't feel guilty if a loved one passes and you have that moment where you feel,
oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. I'm
exactly.
feeling, no.
Just allow it. So you could hold terrible, profound grief and relief and joy at the celebration of his life
all at the same
time, and that's okay. It's not one or the other.
I think that's a really tremendously important point to share, because I know people feel like, oh my gosh, somebody laughed or smiled at this time. That's so terrible. We're supposed to just, be very solemn and
yes, we're very conditioned.
Yes,
and
we are.
We need to free ourselves of that, because I had so many people at his celebration of life, it became kind of a running joke that I had people come up to me, especially men, and say, "This is the best. I told my wife, this is how I want to go.
This is how I want to go.
This is my send-off."
Yes.
And I think we inspired people just to look at end of life differently.
I think that is so extraordinary, because I have I'm not bragging when I say I felt like I could probably get a punch card and get it punched, and I've earned a free funeral, because I've been to so many.
Yes.
And I always kind of leave even more sad when it has nothing to do with the person. It doesn't reflect who they were at all. And I wrote about Diane in my book, and they had this. It was just an open room, and they had her canoe there, and they had a talking stick, and everyone went up and laughed and cried and shared stories, and it was so her.
Yeah.
And then you leave, yes, you're happy and sad. And that, I think, is one of the most important things to share. There's tremendous relief when someone is no longer suffering. There's tremendous relief in that, and that's okay.
Yes. And so I learned through the grieving process, I probably did it wrong when friends and family were going through grief, and I didn't show up for them. And so I now forgive myself.
Yes.
When you know better, you do better. And I like to pass along some of those lessons, because I still have friends who are awkward 2 years later. I lost my husband 2 years ago, and I bumped into a friend just before Christmas, and I hadn't seen her in all that time, and she was just so remorseful that she never reached out.
Yeah.
She hadn't sent a card, she didn't come to the celebration, and she was in tears explaining to me that she felt so bad about this. And I said, please forgive yourself.
Forgive yourself.
I get it. I understand.
Yep.
Some of us are just so uncomfortable. We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do, which is what you
Preaching to
always
the
say.
choir, yes.
And what I've learned is that the people that made the biggest difference for us, it was our neighbor Amy, who when we were spending long days at the hospital, I'd come home. Oh, it would be a care basket with hot soup, bread, crunchy bread. And she would think of Carter, and she'd pack licorice, something to distract him.
Thank you, Amy, for just showing up.
Amy is amazing.
Seriously.
It would be, a neighbor who had shoveled our walkway.
Those are all the things.
It would be, we had a really difficult time getting wheelchair ramps, because my husband came home in a wheelchair, and we didn't have time to react, and I was overwhelmed. Couldn't find.
Jeez, I
had a neighbor figure that problem out for us. And a good friend came and installed. So one neighbor installed the indoor ones, and a good friend came and installed the outdoor ones. Things that, as caregiver and a grieving family, you're overwhelmed. You can't even think.
You can't.
And so when your people come in to back you up like that, it means a lot. It makes such a difference.
That is such another incredibly important moment, in that people may often think, oh my goodness, he has advanced cancer. I don't know anything about that. I just need to leave that to the experts. And we need the professionals and the experts a small percentage of the time. The rest of the time, we need crunchy bread and licorice and we need ramps, and we need
somebody
shoveling.
to drive Carter back and forth
Yes,
to school, which
pick up
was
the
a big
kids,
thing.
drive
And
them.
all of those little things supported us through our, the worst time that you could ever imagine. And then to continue on even after Patrick passed, so that there's a period of time where it gets very quiet. So there's a
Yes.
lot of celebration. People are there in your lives, and then all of a sudden they disappear. And there's this feeling of, oh, everybody's life has moved on, and I'm now
And here's-
stuck.
Yes.
And so remembering the grieving person, not 1 week later, 2 weeks later, but actually 3 months later, 6 months later, on those anniversaries. And I still have people that reach out and just a little text to say, they knew that January's
Thinking
our
of
2-year
you.
anniversary.
Yes.
So it's a little text to say thinking of you, and that means a tremendous amount. Yeah.
And again, you're validating what I share, because what people think, I can't spend hours, I don't have money. It doesn't have to
can be
take a lot of
small.
time. The smallest gestures of kindness, right, means so
Card.
much.
If you can go to the funeral or the celebration, do. That's something I used to be a funeral avoider. I think because of my early childhood
Sure.
and actually being afraid of funerals,
Yeah.
because that was
We're
the
scary.
impression. They're very scary, very awkward. I go now because
Yeah.
I know how much it meant. If you can at all, just be there, show up.
Just show up.
Means
And,
a lot.
and I love when people say, I hate funerals. If you were the person that was saying, I really love funerals, I feel like I'd be more concerned.
Nobody likes that.
What? And yes, it's uncomfortable. Show up anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Don't wait for it to be comfortable, and don't wait for this brilliant thing to say. You're not there to fix grief. You can't fix grief. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here.
That's
right?
actually the best thing to say. And again,
It's good to
I learned that I was probably doing it wrong all along. So I'm a fixer, right?
Oh yeah,
And
me
so
too. Guilty.
I've learned now that any sentence that begins with "at least,"
Oh, don't at least people.
don't at least, and
Just don't at least people.
no. And again, if you've done this, no judgment, you're forgiven. But now, please don't do it again. So for the griever, hearing what are intended as comforting words, like "at least you'll always have the memories." Well, no, in fact, that's not comforting. I want my husband.
Right, absolutely.
At least he didn't suffer. Well, that's true, and I might say that, but I really
You're
don't,
allowed to say that.
I don't want to hear it back.
That's right.
The "at least" it minimizes the pain, and it's
100%.
so what I now know is a better approach is just to sit and say, hey, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, but I can hold your hand
I'm here.
and I can sit in this dark pit with you for as long as you need.
And this is hard.
Yeah.
And this is sad.
Listen. And just listen to whatever that person wants
See,
to
we're
share.
all qualified. And
We are all
right,
qualified.
anyone can make a difference with an act of kindness, and anyone can make a difference by just listening. So here's the thing, let's take the pressure off. It's not your job to fix it.
No.
It's not your job to
You
fix
can't.
it. You can't fix grief. Don't wait for it to be comfortable. Yes, I know you don't like funerals. If you did, that's more of a concern. And just show up, because there's so many things that you don't have the capacity to do in your grief, and there's so many moving pieces. You need help with all of them. The driving someone, your child, to town or anywhere, or picking up some groceries. Don't leave all of the decisions to you, like, okay, do you want this? Or you can say, I'm getting you dinner, would you prefer lasagna or pizza?
And this is so true, because had somebody asked me, can I
okay.
make you dinner? Yes, that's the reaction,
okay.
right? And when you're overwhelmed with caregiving and grief, you also you don't want to you still don't want to burden
I
other
know.
people.
Or
And
ridiculous with.
You're almost embarrassed to
Yeah.
take the help.
I want to be strong.
And
Yeah.
so those really wise people, like my neighbor Amy, who just showed up and dropped off,
Yeah,
and
here you
just
go.
like a little mouse, she would just tiptoe
Yeah,
in.
how
and
beautiful.
She would fill our bird feeder. She still does fill our bird
Aw.
feeder in the backyard,
Yeah.
because she knew how much, if Patrick was able to, he could watch the bird feeder. That meant a lot. those little gestures are enormous.
They mean so
comfort.
much. And the fact that grief carries on, and I love that you're wearing your grieving pin. Let's
Yes.
talk about this grieving pin from
Yeah.
Heather Taylor, After Loss. Thank you very much, Heather.
Yes, this is brilliant, and I was so grateful to receive one, or to be able to get one through you. I read somewhere that back in the day, widows would wear a black veil, and so that black veil was to
Symbolize your
symbolize
grief.
that
Yes.
you've lost something,
Yes.
and that you're still tender and fragile.
Yes.
And so when I re-entered work and life without my husband, I would be in these very strange conversations or meetings where people weren't aware what I was going through, and yet I wasn't fully myself. And so I
Right.
wanted a way to signal to people, hey, I'm still fragile.
Yes.
And I couldn't voice that. And so when these beauties
Yes.
came along,
Beautiful grieving pin.
I ordered a bunch of them, and I have handed them out to others. So it's
Awesome.
just a little indicator that, hey, I'm going through something. You might not be visible, but please be patient with me.
Yes.
And if
And
I
you can
have
wear it
a
on
little-
harder days, right? It's like, you know what, today I'm doing okay, but
Yeah.
maybe the next day you're, where's my pin? I'm having a hard day.
I have a colleague, Tracy. Tracy and I work very closely together, and there was one day a few months ago when I was not myself, and I wasn't wearing my pin. And we had a difficult work conversation, and I overreacted. And it was an emotional outburst that even surprised me, because I wasn't noticing. It was the grief talking. And that'll happen. It'll happen for weeks,
Absolutely.
months, years later. And so I was able to take Tracy aside and say, I'm really sorry, and please forgive me.
Grief kidnapped me just now.
Exactly. And
Yes,
once we were able
yes.
to name it, she was like, "Oh, okay, that makes way more sense now.
It does.
Now I understand the outburst," and so we worked through it, and we had a good laugh about it later. But just being aware that your emotions are going to be all over the place as
That's
a grieving
right.
person,
And it's okay to say, I'm grieving, here's my pin, I'm having
Yeah.
a hard day.
It's
And do you know
almost
that
like
we're
a
out of
little
time?
pass.
Do you know that we're out of time?
We are out of time. We could talk forever.
We could talk forever. I honor you so much for how much you honor the life you had with Patrick, honor your grief and share it. And I know that you're making a difference for so many people by just being open and honest. And I thank you for that. If my book made a difference for you and our friendship, that means the world to me. And I know that we will be friends forever. So.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the work that you do. It honestly is the playbook, and I've recommended it to everybody in my life. I have bought so many copies and just given it away. This is essential reading, and it is essential life skill, life learning for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So thanks so much for joining us today. Real Life Talks is about learning how to just show up for yourself and others, to be empowered and resilient when grief arrives, have hard conversations sometimes. So if you want to be empowered and resilient and just show up, my call to action is always plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks.